There is an episode of Family Guy where the baby learns that the enormous blast that kicked off the entire universe was triggered by him, entirely by accident, while he was scrambling to find his way home. Every star, every planet, every year of recorded history traces back to that one explosion, and it is only the first of the tangles. Elsewhere in the same series, a baby holds at 1 year old for more than 2 decades, while everything around him grows older. A dog is revealed to be younger than his own teenage son. A cherished character dies, receives a proper funeral, and casually walks back through the door a couple of episodes on. Time flows in reverse. Doorways swing open onto an endless string of other worlds. Taken apart and looked at one by one for a laugh, these bits come across as pure random silliness. Set them next to each other, and what appears is a town built on no fixed laws at all, a place where time, age, life, and death all quietly bend out of shape. 10 of the oddest paradoxes in the whole show walked through one unhurried step at a time. Welcome to Sleepy Broadcast. Let's get into it. The town where time stands still. Family Guy first went on the air on the final night of January in 1999. That opening episode carried the name Death Has a Shadow, and it dropped the viewer into a loud, chaotic household in an invented town called Quahog, tucked inside the tiny state of Rhode Island. There was a heavy-set father named Peter, a long-suffering mother named Lois, a picked-on teenage daughter named Meg, an oblivious teenage son named Chris, a dog named Brian who could talk, and a baby named Stewie who spoke in the voice of a grown man and always seemed to be scheming something dreadful. That was the entire lineup on the first day, an ordinary-looking cartoon family with a strange member or two, living an ordinary-looking life in an ordinary-looking town. The real matter at hand is what that town keeps hidden just below its surface. Family Guy is stuffed with paradoxes, and a paradox, put simply, is a tangle that cannot be pulled loose. It is the situation where two things are each shown to be true, even though they cannot both be true at once. No man can be older than his own father. No baby can remain a baby as the years pile up. No person can end their own life before they are even born and still be standing there, chatting away. Those are exactly the sorts of tangles this show keeps tying, over and over. Sometimes it does this deliberately, for a joke, and sometimes it seems not to notice at all. The oddest thing of all is that the very first and largest paradox is not buried inside some wild time travel plot. It sits out in the open, right there in the ages of the family members, from the opening scene onward. Begin with the baby. At the start of the show, Stewie was under a year old. He was the family's newest arrival, small enough to be carried from room to room, young enough to still be in diapers. Toward the close of that first season, in an episode titled Chitty Chitty Death Bang, the family threw him a party for his first birthday. That is a sweet, everyday thing for a cartoon to do. A baby turns 1, there are candles, a cake, a little hat, the kind of milestone that arrives once in a whole life and is then gone for good. Because the following year, that same child turns 2, and then 3, and keeps on climbing. For Stewie, that climb never arrived. After that first birthday, the years outside the screen kept stacking up. 1 year turned into 5, 5 into 10, 10 into 20. The show kept turning out new episodes the entire time, hundreds upon hundreds of them, season after season. And across every one of those years, Stewie stayed the same age, the same height, the same round head, the same football-shaped little body. The identical baby, frozen right at the edge of turning 1, while the calendar out in the real world spun forward like a fan. A first birthday is supposed to be a doorway into the next year of a life. His turned into a room with no way out. This is where the tangle begins to draw tight. The world inside Family Guy is not frozen in the slightest. The reverse is the case. The show works hard to feel current. The family chats about the newest phones and the newest gadgets. They reference real events from the real world as those events unfold. They watch programs that did not exist when the cartoon began. When something major breaks in the news, the Griffins seem to catch wind of it soon after, as though they share the same rolling year that the audience lives in. So the world surrounding this family plainly moves ahead. Time passes in Quahog. New things show up, old things fade, the years turn over. That lays down the first true paradox of the series, and it is a quiet one. The world keeps advancing, but the people inside it do not. The father never sprouts a single gray hair, the mother never ages a day, and the baby, who ought to have become a toddler, then a small child, then a schoolboy, never grows at all. He has now been 1 year old for longer than plenty of the people watching have been alive. Inside the story, decades of fresh technology and fresh events heap up around him, all of it proof that time is rolling past, and he sits at the center of it like a stone in a river, untouched by the current that is so clearly flowing on every side. The contradiction grows sharper the moment the rest of the family is held up beside him. The children are not all locked at one age. Meg, the eldest child, has been shown growing older over the run of the show. She began as a 15-year-old. Later, she was 16. Later, still, she was 17. So inside the same house, under the same roof, with the same parents, one clock is permitted to tick and another is not. Meg inches forward through her teenage years, while her baby brother does not budge an inch. Two children in one family, born into a single timeline, aging at wholly different speeds, and the show treats this as perfectly ordinary. No one in Quahog ever pauses to wonder why the teenage girl keeps having birthdays while the baby never has a genuine second one. Plenty of cartoons keep their characters the same age forever, and that piece on its own is nothing unusual. The Simpsons has done it for even longer, with Bart stuck at 10 and Lisa stuck at 8, while the world moves on around them. Freezing a cast in place is a common device, because it lets a show run for decades without the kids growing up, leaving home, and bringing the whole thing to an end. So far, nothing out of the ordinary. What pushes Family Guy past the usual trick is how loudly it insists on staying current at the same time. A show can quietly freeze its people and never once mention the date. Family Guy freezes its people and then keeps pointing at the calendar, naming the year, nodding toward the latest things. It holds the family still with one hand and waves the moving world around with the other, and it never seems to feel the strain of gripping both at once. The way the show is drawn makes the freeze even more total. An animated baby is under no obligation to stay the same. The artists could have aged him a little, thinned the cheeks, added some hair, stretched him taller over the years if they had wanted to. They never did. Stewie has been redrawn thousands of times across thousands of scenes by many different hands over more than 20 years, and the design has stayed very nearly identical the whole way. Every new episode is a fresh chance for him to look even slightly older. Every new episode lets that chance go by. The sameness is not an accident that slipped through the cracks. It is a decision made again and again, on purpose, for decades, and it is what keeps the paradox alive and breathing. Sit with what this genuinely means inside the world of the show, and it turns a bit eerie. Time in Quahog is broken in a very particular way. The town moves through the years, but the family does not move along with it. For the Griffins, growing older is simply switched off. A baby can stay a baby through several decades of shifting seasons and shifting world events, and never reach the next stage of being alive. In any real life, that would be impossible and frightening. In this town, it is just the weather. Nobody notices, Nobody resists it. Nobody so much as raises it. The family drifts above time like a photograph that somehow goes on talking and moving, while the world it was taken in keeps changing behind it. Something strange happens to the people watching too, the longer the show goes on. A child who first met Stewie as a baby in 1999 could by now be a fully grown adult, with a job, a home, perhaps children of their own. That viewer aged through every stage Stewie never reached. They grew up, they changed, they pushed forward through all the years the baby refused to touch, and whenever they come back to the show, the baby is still there, still 1 year old, still exactly the same, waiting inside a year that never ends. The audience does all the aging the family will not do. The family becomes a fixed point, a spot that never moves while everyone on the far side of the screen keeps drifting away from it. This frozen family is the ground that every other strange thing in the series gets to stand on. Once a show has quietly decided that its people need not obey the plain rule that living things grow older, it has already loosened the laws of time itself. The door is open. If a baby can stay 1 year old while 20 years slide by, then perhaps a baby can also do far wilder things to time without cracking the world he lives in. The frozen ages are the small, calm version of the chaos that arrives later. They are the first sign that in this town, cause and effect are gentle suggestions rather than hard laws. Everything stranger that follows, every trip through time, and every undone death only works because the show already taught the audience, way back in the first season, that the normal flow of years does not fully apply here. So the town where time stands still is the starting line. A family that never ages inside a world that never stops moving. A baby with one birthday and no second one for the better part of a lifetime. A teenage sister allowed to grow while her little brother is not. None of it is hidden, and none of it is ever explained. It is simply the way Quahog runs, accepted by everyone in it without a second thought. The soil out of which 100 larger paradoxes will grow. Before we move on, if this analysis is landing for you, think about subscribing. It is a real help to the channel. And of all the family members caught inside this frozen town, one of them carries the age problem to a far stranger place than the baby ever could. He walks upright, drives a car, drinks at the bar, and somehow manages to be both far too young and far too old at the very same moment. The dog who is too young to be this old. Brian is the family dog, and from the outside he looks like a perfectly ordinary white Labrador. He has fur, he has a tail, he has the long snout and floppy ears of a regular pet. Peter came across him on the street years ago and brought him home, the way a person might take in any stray. Before that, Brian had been a homeless dog with no one, washing car windshields for spare change just to scrape by, until Peter turned up and offered him a place in the family. That is where the resemblance to a normal dog runs out. Brian talks, and not in little barks the family pretends to follow, but in full, clear sentences delivered in a deep voice by a sharp mind. He drives a car. He sits at the bar and drinks. He writes novels, falls for human women, votes, argues about the news, and hauls around the worries of a grown man who fears his best years may be slipping past. He is a dog in shape alone. For all of that, the show keeps yanking him back down into plain doghood whenever a joke calls for it. The same Brian who writes novels and argues about politics will, in the middle of an everyday scene, clean himself with his tongue the way any dog would. He scratches at fleas with a hind leg. He gives chase to things thrown for him before he can stop himself, and his head snaps towards sounds no person would notice. So the picture of him splits straight down the center. In his mind and his manners, he is a weary, grown man with a writer's ego and a drinker's regrets. In his body and his instincts, he is still very much an animal. The show holds both of these at once, and never lets either side win, treating a creature who can drive to the bar and a creature who licks himself clean as one and the same person in one and the same breath. A real dog does not live very long. Most dogs reach somewhere between 10 and 15 years, and then their time is up. Because their lives are so much shorter than a person's, people have a simple way of picturing a dog's age. They count in dog years. The notion is that a single year of a dog's life is worth several years of a human one, since the dog packs a whole lifetime into such a short stretch. A dog that is a few years old in plain counting may act middle-aged. A dog that reaches 10 or 12 is already old and gray. This idea is so widespread that nearly everyone has heard it, and Family Guy leans on it hard because it hands the show a clever way to make Brian any age it likes, whenever it likes. Here is where the tangle begins. In one of the early episodes, back in the second season, Brian states his age flatly. He says he is 7 years old, and he reckons that if he is lucky, he has maybe 7 more years ahead of him. That is a normal thing for a dog to say about a dog's life. 7 years lived, 7 or so left, and then the long sleep. So the show, in its own words and its own canon, pegged Brian's age at a young number. A 7-year-old dog is no longer a puppy, but it is a long way from old. It is a dog with most of its life still out in front of it. The trouble is that Brian never behaves like a creature who is only 7 of anything. He carries himself like a man in his 40s who has started to wonder where the years went. He has written more than one book and treats writing as the great work of his life. He dates grown women and holds long, serious relationships with them. He drinks the way an adult drinks, sometimes too much, and he speaks of regret and loneliness and missed chances like someone who has already lived a long, full, complicated life. The number says young, the life says old. Those two facts already sit uneasily side by side before the show does anything wild with them. Then comes the moment that turns the uneasy feeling into a true, unbreakable tangle. In the 6th season, in an episode named The Former Life of Brian, which aired in the spring of 2008, Brian discovers that he is a father. Long before the show began, he had been in a relationship, and out of that relationship came a child. That child is now a boy named Dylan, and Dylan is 13 years old. Brian meets him, takes him in, and tries to work out how to be a dad to a teenager he never knew he had. The show plays it for jokes, and for a few softer moments, the way it usually does. Sit with the numbers for a second, and the floor drops out. Brian, by the show's own earlier word, is around 7 years old, maybe 8 if a little time has slipped past. His son Dylan is 13. A father cannot be younger than his own child. It is one of the most basic rules of how living things work. To have a 13-year-old son, Brian would have had to become a father at the age of -5 or 6, meaning he would have had a child years before he himself existed. The math is not merely unlikely, it is flatly impossible. The child is older than the father who made him. A young dog is somehow the parent of a teenager who has been alive longer than the dog has. The show never stops to patch this. No one in the story points at the gap and asks how it could be true. Brian does not sit Dylan down and admit the dates make no sense. The family simply accepts that the dog has a teenage son, the same way they accept everything else in this town, with a shrug and a punchline. The impossible father and son math is left lying right there in the open, never mended, never explained, just quietly folded into the show as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Now the strangeness spins the other way, because Brian is not only too young. By the rules of dog years, he is also far too old. In a later episode, in the 14th season, named Underage Peter, the mayor of Quahog decides to raise the legal drinking age all the way to 50. Suddenly, almost no one in town is old enough to buy alcohol, because almost no one has lived 50 years. Peter cannot buy his own beer, and neither can his friends. Only one member of the household clears the new bar, and it is the dog. Thanks to dog years, Brian counts as more than 50 years old enough to stroll into the store and buy whatever he pleases. Peter, unable to drink legally himself, simply sends Brian to buy all his booze for him. Lay those two facts next to each other, and the paradox stands fully exposed. Brian is too young to be the father of his own teenage son, younger than a boy he supposedly created. At the very same time, Brian is older than every grown adult in town, old enough to drink when a 50-year limit wipes out everyone else. One number makes him a child, another makes him an elder. He is both at once, in the same body, in the same show, and the writers never choose between them. His age is not a fixed thing the way an age should be. It bends to suit whatever the moment needs. That bending is the trick at the heart of it. Dog years hand the show a stretchy ruler, and the writers pull it long or push it short, depending on the joke they want to tell. When a scene needs Brian to feel like a young soul with his whole life ahead of him, his age shrinks down to 7. When a scene needs him to be the wise, weary one, his age stretches into middle age. When a scene needs the only legal drinker in a town with a 50-year limit, his age balloons past 50. The same dog can be a kid, a grown man, and an old-timer within the run of the series, and which one he is depends entirely on which gets the bigger laugh. His age is a tool the show reaches for, rather than a true fact about who he is. What makes all of this land as a real tangle, rather than a simple mistake, is how calmly the household carries it. No one in the family ever pauses over the fact that their dog has outlived every natural span a dog could have. No one wonders aloud how a creature his age came to father a teenager, or how the same dog can be both too young for one thing and too old for another. The strangeness is never spoken of, never argued about, never even noticed. To the Griffins, Brian is simply Brian, an age that means nothing and a lifespan with no end, and they go on handing him the newspaper and the car keys as though a dog who breaks the rules of time were the most ordinary roommate in the world. The longest version of the problem is the easiest to see, and it underlies everything else. Brian has been alive for the entire run of the show, which now stretches across more than 20 years and hundreds of episodes. A real dog who said he was 7, with maybe 7 years left, would have run out of time long ago. By his own honest accounting, by the numbers he gave with his own mouth, Brian should have grown old and passed away many seasons back. Instead, he is still here, still 7-ish, still writing his books and nursing his drinks, having outlived his own stated lifespan several times over, while never aging past the number he started with. A dog with a short life has somehow had an endless one. The show even proved, in its own canon, that dogs in this world live and die like any other. Long before Brian, the Griffin family had another talking dog, a pet named Todd, who grew old in the ordinary way and was finally put down at 15 when illness took him. 15 is a long life for a dog and a fitting end for one. Todd aged, sickened, and died exactly as a real animal would, which tells the audience plainly that the normal rules of a dog's lifespan do apply inside this town. That makes Brian's case stranger still. A dog before him followed the natural path from puppy to old age to death in 15 short years, while Brian has sailed past 20 years and more without aging a single day. He is the one creature for whom the clock that claimed Todd simply refuses to tick. This is the same broken clock from before, wearing a different face. The baby and the dog are two corners of one strange room. With Stewie, time is frozen, locked tight, refusing to move at all. With Brian, time is unstuck in the opposite way, sliding loose, never settling on a single number, free to be small or large as needed. The baby never ages, and the dog ages in every direction at once, and both of them live in the same house, under the same broken rules, in the same town where the normal flow of years means nothing. The dog's version is the louder of the two, because his numbers do not simply sit quietly. They argue with each other right out in the open, 7 against 13, young against old, father against a son who came first, a single creature carrying two ages that flatly refuse to agree. Before we move on, if this analysis is landing for you, think about subscribing. It is a real help to the channel. Of everyone in that frozen, age-bending household, Brian holds one special and steady role that almost no one else can fill. He is the one who always seems to know exactly what the baby is saying. While the rest of the family treats Stewie's grand speeches as nothing more than baby noise, the dog catches every word and answers back. That single fact opens the next tangle, because once you tug on the question of who can hear the baby, the whole family starts to come apart in a way no one can quite explain. The baby no one can agree about. Stewie is the youngest member of the Griffin family, a baby small enough to be carried on a hip and young enough to still ride in a high chair. The voice that comes out of him matches none of that. He speaks in long, clean, grown-up sentences with a sharp tongue and a fancy accent that sounds nothing like his American parents. He hatches elaborate schemes. He insults people with care and skill. He talks about his feelings, his plots, his enemies, and his big ideas, all in clear words any listener could follow with ease. In any real living room, a baby who spoke like that would bring the whole house to a stop. People would gather around, they would phone the neighbors, they would not be able to look away. In Quahog, none of that happens, and the reason it does not happen is the puzzle sitting at the center of this whole family. Most of the time, the people around Stewie behave as though his careful, clever speeches are nothing but the babble of a baby. He delivers a perfect cutting line, and the room moves on as though he had only gurgled and cooed. So the real question, the one that has chased the show for its entire life, is a simple one with no steady answer. When this baby speaks, who can actually hear him? Who understands the words, and who hears only baby sounds? The show has spent more than 20 years refusing to settle that question, and the refusal is the paradox. One thing stays solid through all of it. Brian, the dog, always understands. The baby and the dog talk together the way two grown friends would, back and forth, easy and natural, trading jokes and arguments and secrets. They take long trips together, plan things together, wound each other's feelings, and make up, all through plain conversation. Whatever strange rule governs the rest of the house, it does not touch the bond between these two. The dog hears every word the baby says and answers every one, and that friendship is the most stable thing in the entire show. If the question were only about Brian, there would be no puzzle at all. The trouble begins with everyone else. Sometimes a member of the family clearly hears Stewie. Someone answers a thing he said, or reacts to a plan he just announced, or holds a short exchange with him as if his words landed perfectly well. Then, in another scene, maybe even later the same day inside the story, that very same person treats him as a silent baby again. He can stand in the middle of the room and deliver a full speech, and his own mother might look right past him as though the air itself made the sound. The same parent who answered him an hour ago now hears nothing. The same brother who laughed at his joke last week now stares blankly. The signals never line up. One scene says they hear him fine, the next says they never could, and the show keeps both without ever choosing. The man who created the show has been asked about this more than anything else, and he has admitted as much himself. Seth MacFarlane has called it the single most asked question about the entire series. People have wanted a straight answer for years. The answers he has given, though, do not hold still either. At one point, he explained that everyone in the family can in fact hear and understand exactly what Stewie says. The reason they seem to ignore him, by that account, is that he is a baby, and grown people simply do not take a baby seriously, so they let his words slide past without really listening. By that telling, the family hears him perfectly and just chooses not to care. Later, at a large fan gathering in 2011, the same creator gave the answer a different shape. There, he laid out a rough order. Brian always understands the baby. Chris, the older brother, understands him some of the time, and Peter, Lois, and Meg do not understand him. That sounds tidy for a moment, until he added the catch that takes the tidiness away. He admitted these were not firm rules. The writers bend them whenever bending them makes a scene funnier. So even the man in charge described the rule as something reshaped on purpose, scene by scene, to fit the joke of the moment, rather than to stay true to itself. A producer on the show later drew the line in yet another spot. He explained that inside the family, Brian and sometimes Chris are the ones who understand Stewie, while the wider world outside the home is meant to hear only baby sounds. By that version, the family's edge is the wall. Inside it, a couple of them get it. Outside it, no one does. The show then turns around and breaks that wall too, because there are episodes where a stranger, someone with no tie to the family at all, sits across from Stewie and holds a long, full, deep conversation with him, as if there were nothing odd about it. So the line that was supposed to guard the rule gets crossed by the very show that made the rule. Every fence put up around the question gets knocked down somewhere else in the run. What that leaves behind is a rule with no real shape. The people who built the show have given more than one answer, and the answers disagree with each other. The show itself then ignores all of those answers whenever a louder laugh is on offer. A baby who is understood, a baby who is ignored, a baby heard by a stranger and missed by his own mother. All of these are shown as true at different times, and none of them is ever marked as the wrong one. The law of who can hear Stewie is less a law than a mood. It shifts with the scene, and nothing inside the story ever forces it to stay put. The show is fully aware of this, and it has turned the question into a joke about itself more than once. In one episode, a character from a different cartoon shows up inside a dream. When he wakes from dreaming that he was Peter, he remarks that he always wakes up too soon, right before he can find out whether the family can understand the baby. The line is a wink straight at the audience. The show knows everyone watching has wondered the same thing, knows the answer has never come, and points at the gap on purpose, treating its own unsolved puzzle as the punchline. The biggest wink of all came in a later season. In the first episode of the 19th year, named Stewie's First Word, the family is at church when Stewie, furious over something small, shouts a single rude word so loudly that the entire congregation hears it and understands it perfectly. Heads turn. Everyone reacts. For one moment, the baby is heard by a whole room of people, clear as a bell. Afterward, Brian asks the obvious thing, the thing the audience has wanted to ask for 2 decades. He wonders aloud why everyone suddenly understood Stewie just then, when the baby has been speaking in full sentences the whole time. Stewie works out his own theory and answer. He decides that people can only understand him when he is feeling an emotion strong enough, and the rest of the time his words simply do not reach them. The show took its oldest unsolved question and built a whole story out of poking at it, while still never landing on a final fixed truth. Stripped down to its bones, the paradox is short and stubborn. A baby speaks in words clear enough for anyone to understand. The family proves they can hear those words because they answer him, react to him, and talk with him. The family also proves they cannot hear those words because they ignore him, talk over him, and treat him as a silent infant. Both of these are shown on screen as real. Both are part of the canon of the show. The baby is understood and not understood at the same time by the same people, and the contradiction is never solved, never patched, never even fully owned. It just goes on scene after scene, year after year. This is the same loose, broken world from the earlier tangles. Only now the loose thread runs through the most basic act there is. Time will not move for the baby, age will not settle for the dog, and speech, the simplest tool a family has, the plain act of one person hearing another, will not hold a steady rule either. In any normal home, being heard is the floor everything else stands on. In this home, even that floor tilts and shifts to suit the joke. Frozen years, bending dog years, and a baby whose every word both lands and vanishes at once. The town keeps proving, in one way after another, that the ordinary laws of cause and effect are only on loan here, handed out and taken back whenever the show pleases. Before we move on, if this analysis is landing for you, think about subscribing. It is a real help to the channel. There is a quiet sadness folded into all of it too. The one person who could warn this family about almost anything, the small genius who notices everything and says it out loud, is the one they listen to least. The baby could tell them what is coming, and they would hear only noise. So when the day finally arrives that the entire family gets wiped away and rebuilt into different people with different lives and different last names, the warning does not come from the clever baby at all. It comes far too late, and the person who causes the whole thing is the father, Peter, by stepping back into a single forgotten night from his own past and changing one small choice he made there. The night Peter erased his own kids. The trouble starts with a feeling most grown people know well. In an episode from the 5th season named Meet the Quagmires, which first aired in the spring of 2007, Peter sits and listens to his neighbor Quagmire brag about the wild, free life of a single man. No wife, no kids, no rules, just one big night after another. The more Peter hears, the more he aches over the years he gave up. He married young. He settled down young. He never got to be a careless 18-year-old with nothing to lose. And now, sitting there as a heavy, middle-aged dad, he wishes more than anything that he could go back and live one night of that lost freedom. In this town, a wish like that does not stay a wish for long. Death himself, drawn out to the local bar by a false alarm, hears Peter moping and decides to grant it. With a snap, he sends Peter back to the year 1984, turning him 18 again for a single night. And Brian comes along for the ride. The rules are clear and small. One night, one young version of himself, one chance to taste the life he thinks he missed. Everything about the setup feels harmless. A quick trip down memory lane that should leave no mark on anything. The whole future hangs on one tiny choice, and Peter walks straight into it. Back in 1984, the young Peter had a date planned with Lois, the girl he would one day marry. They were supposed to go to a movie together, a quiet evening that in the real history of his life helped seal the love between them. This time, with his second chance in hand, Peter blows it off. He cancels the date with Lois and instead heads out to party at a bar with his friend Cleveland, chasing the wild night he came back for. One movie date traded away for one fun evening. To Peter, it feels like nothing. It is the most important nothing he will ever do. The night goes exactly the way he hoped. Peter dances, drinks, and ends up kissing the young actress Molly Ringwald, living out the single guy fantasy that Quagmire's bragging had stirred up in him. He has his fun, he gets his lost night, and then death appears again, right on schedule, and pulls him back to the present day, his wish complete. Peter returns home pleased with himself, expecting to slot right back into the life he left. The life he left, though, is no longer there to slot into. The present has changed, and the changes spread out in every direction. Peter walks into a world where he never married Lois at all. Instead, he has been married for 20 years to Molly Ringwald, the actress he kissed that night. Lois has married someone else entirely, and the someone else is Quagmire, the very neighbor whose bragging started this whole mess. The ripples reach far past the family, too. The country has a different president, with Al Gore in charge instead of the man who really held the office. Even the host of a famous late-night talk show has changed. One skipped movie date in 1984 reached forward through more than 20 years and rewrote the map of the entire world. The deepest cut is waiting at home. Peter still has children in this new world, 3 of them, in the same house, around the same age. They are not his children. Chris, Meg, and Stewie, the kids Peter knew, are gone. In their place stand 3 children fathered by Quagmire, carrying Quagmire's chin and Quagmire's nose and Quagmire's habits. Born from the marriage between Lois and the neighbor, the baby in the high chair is a different baby. The teenagers at the table are different teenagers. The family Peter spent years raising has been quietly unmade, and a brand new set of people, born from a different father, sits in their chairs as though they had always been there. Sit with what that means, and it lands hard. 3 real children, kids who laughed and cried and grew up in that house, simply stop existing. They are not killed, they are not sent away, they are undone, erased from having ever been born, because the single night that led to their making never happened. The love story that created them got skipped, so they got skipped too. Blinked out of the world by one careless choice their father made before any of them were even thought of, and the world does not mourn them, because in this new shape of things, there is no one left who knows they were ever real. Different children took their place, and life rolled on without a gap. Here the time tangle pulls tight, and it pulls in a strange direction. Peter remembers his real children. He knows their faces, their names, the life they shared, even though in this new world, they were never born. He still carries a photograph of the 3 of them, the kids who no longer exist anywhere in reality. Brian remembers them too, because Brian traveled back through time with Peter and kept his memories of the way things used to be. So both of them walk around holding clear, full memories of children who, by the rules of this new timeline, never came into being at all. A memory is supposed to be a record of something that happened. Their memories are records of something that, in the world they now stand in, never happened to anyone. How a memory can survive of a child who was never born is a question the show raises and then strolls right past. Peter cannot live with what he has done, and he begs death to send him back so he can fix it. Putting it right turns out to be far harder than breaking it. Sent again to 1984, Peter keeps fumbling the very date he needs to keep, blowing his chance again and going off with Cleveland once more, until death loses patience and refuses to give him any more tries. With his do-overs used up, Peter and Brian sneak into the country club dance, where, in the changed history, Lois first fell for Quagmire. Their goal is to stop the kiss between Lois and Quagmire that started the whole wrong path. Standing there in the middle of the dance, Brian looks down at Peter's photograph of the 3 children, the kids who are slipping away, and understands exactly what is at stake and exactly what must be done. Peter manages to win Lois back, to put their love story back on its proper track. And with that, the timeline snaps into its right shape. The world returns to the way it was. The wrong children fade, and the real Chris, Meg, and Stewie return to their chairs, born once more, alive once more, as though they had never been gone. The family is whole again, restored by undoing the undoing. No one but Peter and Brian will ever know how close all 3 of those kids came to never having lived at all. The whole adventure is a careful, almost step-by-step echo of a famous old movie about a teenage boy who travels back to his parents' youth and nearly stops them from falling in love, which nearly erases his own existence in the process. The show borrows that story openly and proudly, swapping the teenage boy for a grown dad and the worried son for 3 children who can vanish. Building the episode on top of a story the whole audience already knows makes the danger easy to feel. Everyone watching understands the rule from the movie. Meddle with the moment your parents got together, and you risk wiping yourself or your children clean off the page of the world. There is an extra crack hiding inside this episode, one that opens up when it is set beside the rest of the show. At that 1984 dance, Quagmire appears as a young man, close enough in age to Peter and Lois to be standing in the same room at the same kind of teenage event. Years later, in a different episode, the show puts Quagmire's age on a driver's license, and the number listed there is 61. If Quagmire is 61 in the present day, then back in 1984, he would already have been a grown man well into adulthood, far too old to be a teenager at a young people's dance beside an 18-year-old Peter and Lois. The two facts cannot both be true. A paradox has quietly slipped inside the paradox, an age that does not add up, tucked into an episode already built on a timeline that does not hold. All of it points back to the same truth about this town. The shape of the family is not locked. It can be deleted and rebuilt by a single forgotten night. Children can be wiped out of having ever existed and swapped for other children, and the world will simply carry on, while memories of the lost kids float around in the heads of the only 2 who happened to be standing outside of time when the change was made. Frozen years, a dog with no fixed age, a baby heard and unheard at once, and now a whole family that can be unmade and remade by one skipped date in the distant past. The rules of who exists and who gets to keep existing bend here as easily as everything else. Before we move on, if this analysis is landing for you, think about subscribing. It is a real help to the channel. The smallest member of that fragile, flickering family carries the strangest secret of them all. The baby in the high chair, the one who can be erased by his father's bad night and brought back by his father's good one, turns out to be tied to something far larger than any single family tree. Long before he was ever born into that house, in a place where time and space did not yet exist, that same baby lit the spark that made the entire universe begin. The baby who made the whole universe. Among all of Stewie's inventions, the most important is the time machine he built and keeps hidden away in his room. It is his secret. The only other soul who knows it exists is Brian, his dog, and his closest friend, and the 2 of them have used it again and again to drop into different corners of history. For a baby who has not yet learned to walk steadily, building a working machine that travels through time is already a strange and wonderful thing. What that machine leads to, in an episode from the 9th season named The Big Bang Theory, is the single largest claim the show has ever made about any of its characters. It turns the smallest member of the family into the reason that everything, every star, and every world, and all of time itself, exists at all. The whole thing begins, as so much in this town does, with a careless mistake. Stewie and Brian are messing around with the machine, tugging at the controls, arguing over who gets to steer. In the middle of their squabble, the machine misfires and flings them somewhere it was never meant to send anyone. They are thrown clear out of the ordinary world, past the edge of all of history and all of space, into a place that should not be reachable at all. There are no buildings around them, no ground, no sky, no time of day. There is only a blank, white emptiness stretching in every direction, quiet and endless and wrong. Stewie works out where they are, and the answer chills him. They have landed in a place outside of everything. No past lies behind them, because the past has not started yet. No future waits ahead, because there is no time to carry them into it. The whole universe, with all its years and all its planets, simply is not here. The two of them are floating in pure nothing, in the empty space that came before anything was ever made. The little pad they use to jump home cannot help them, because the pad works by aiming at a spot somewhere in time and space, and out here, there are no spots to aim at. There is nowhere to go back to, because back has not been invented yet. Trapped in that emptiness with no normal way out, Stewie reaches for a desperate plan. He explains to Brian that he can overload the small engine inside the return pad, pushing it far past what it was built to handle, until it bursts in a single enormous blast. The blast, if it works, would hurl the two of them out of the nothing and back into reality. The danger is that an explosion that size could just as easily tear them both apart. Stewie hesitates. Brian, in his own roundabout way, talks him into trying it, and Stewie finally overloads the pad. The burst goes off with tremendous force, and the explosion throws them out of the white emptiness and drops them safely back into the world they came from. They made it home. The danger, they think, is over. A few days later, back in the calm of the house, Stewie shows Brian something he has been studying. He has drawn up a careful chart. On one side of the chart sits a picture of the faint leftover energy that still drifts through the whole universe, the quiet trace left behind by the giant burst that first started everything, the event most people call the Big Bang. On the other side sits the energy reading from the explosion the two of them set off to escape the emptiness. Stewie lines them up side by side, and the two patterns match perfectly. Every peak lines up with every peak. They are the same event. The blast that blew Stewie and Brian back into the world was the Big Bang. The meaning takes a moment to settle, and once it settles, it does not let go. The explosion that started the entire universe, the burst that made every galaxy and every sun and the very ground the Griffins walk on, was set off by a baby trying to get home from a place he should never have reached. Before that blast, there was no time and no space, only the white nothing where the two of them were stranded. Their explosion lit the spark. Everything that has ever existed, the whole sweep of history and the whole width of the sky, began the instant Stewie overloaded that little pad to save his own life. The start of all things was a baby's escape plan. Now the tangle tightens into the strangest loop in the entire series. For Stewie to be born, the universe had to already exist, because a baby needs a world to be born into, a family, a planet, a year on the calendar. So the universe came first, and then Stewie. And yet, the universe only exists because Stewie set off the blast that created it. So Stewie came first, and then the universe. Both of those are true at the same time. The world made the baby, and the baby made the world, each one giving rise to the other in a circle that closes on itself with no opening anywhere along the ring. A loop like that does something dizzying to the way cause and effect are supposed to work. Normally, every event has something before it that caused it. A ball moves because a foot kicked it. A baby is born because parents came before. Trace anything backward, and there is always an earlier link in the chain. This loop has no earliest link. The universe causes Stewie, and Stewie causes the universe, and the chain bends back into itself so that there is no true beginning to point at, no first cause that started the whole thing rolling. The beginning of everything reaches forward to a baby who reaches back to start the beginning. It is a circle that somehow brings itself into being, holding itself up by its own two ends. That alone would be enough to make this the biggest paradox in the show. The episode is not finished, though, because it takes that impossible loop and turns it into a weapon. The threat comes from a character named Bertram, who is Stewie's half-brother. The two share the same father, Peter, but have different mothers, which makes them rivals, tied by blood and divided by everything else. Bertram is clever in the same cold way Stewie is, and the two have clashed before. In this episode, Bertram discovers that the time machine exists, and an idea forms in his mind that he believes will rid him of his little rival forever. Bertram's plan is the oldest dark trick in time travel. He decides to go back into the distant past and kill one of Stewie's ancestors, one of the relatives from long ago whose existence is the only reason Stewie was ever born. Wipe out the ancestor, and the whole family line that leads down to Stewie crumbles. No ancestor means no parents, which means no Stewie. Bertram steals the time machine and vanishes into history to do exactly that, certain he is about to erase his brother from having ever existed, cleanly and permanently, with no trace left behind. The catch is the one the episode built so carefully at the start, and it is enormous. If Bertram succeeds and Stewie is never born, then Stewie can never grow up, never build the machine, never get stranded in the white emptiness, and never set off the blast. With no blast, the Big Bang never happens. With no Big Bang, the universe never begins. So killing one small baby in the cradle of history does not simply remove that one baby. It pulls out the single thread that holds up all of creation. Erasing Stewie erases the start of everything, which means erasing the stars, the planets, the years, and every living thing that ever was. Bertram, in trying to delete his brother, is about to delete the whole of existence without even knowing it. The danger announces itself fast. Soon after Bertram leaves, the world around Stewie and Brian begins to come apart. Ripples spread through reality, and pieces of the world start blinking out of existence, swallowed up as the universe begins to unravel from the inside. Stewie and Brian take shelter inside the time machine, the one spot still steady, while everything else dissolves. Watching the world fall away, Stewie understands at once what has happened. His brother has gone back and prevented his birth, and because his birth is the hidden key to the whole universe is now collapsing in on itself, second by second. There is only one move left. Stewie and Brian aim the machine to arrive in the past just before Bertram does, 15 minutes ahead of him, hoping to stop the murder before it can be done. The machine sets them down in the city of Venice, in Italy, more than 500 years ago, in the late part of the 1400s. There, Stewie learns the name of the ancestor Bertram has come to kill, and the name is a famous one. His distant relative is Leonardo da Vinci, the great artist and inventor whose paintings and clever machines are still known and loved today. The baby plotting to take over the world turns out to be a descendant of one of the most celebrated minds in all of human history. Even in the middle of a fight to save reality, Stewie pauses to think it through, and his reasoning shows how carefully the show is playing with its own family tree. He works out that since he and Bertram share the same father, but have different mothers, Da Vinci has to be a relative from his mother, Lois's side of the family. The logic is sharp. If Da Vinci were related through their shared father, then killing him would erase Bertram too, and Bertram would never be foolish enough to undo himself. So the target has to sit on the side of the family that belongs to Stewie alone. The rescue itself runs on the same bloodline math the whole threat is built on. The clash comes quickly. Bertram appears and hurls a knife straight at Leonardo da Vinci, meaning to end the great inventor's life and the family line along with it. Stewie throws himself into the path and blocks the strike, saving his ancestor. The two brothers turn on each other. Stewie tries to finish Bertram off. Bertram strikes first and gets away, leaping onto one of Da Vinci's own inventions, a flying machine with great wide wings, and taking to the air. Stewie climbs aboard another of the inventor's winged machines and gives chase, and the two of them battle high above the old city, swooping and diving among the clouds. In the end, Stewie gets the better of his brother and stops him for good. The murder is prevented. The ancestor lives. The family line holds, and reality knits itself back together. The universe, brought to the brink of vanishing by one jealous sibling, goes on existing. Step back from the chase, and the size of what this episode dared to do comes into view. The show took one of its characters, the baby who gets ignored at the dinner table, the one whose words half the family pretends not to hear, and placed him at the very center of all of existence. His accidental escape became the birth of the universe. His near erasure became the near end of everything. Two of the heaviest ideas in all of time travel, the loop that has no beginning and the killing that unmakes a whole world, were stacked one on top of the other and packed into a single half-hour cartoon, played partly for laughs and partly for real wonder. Most stories would build an entire epic around just one of those ideas. This one used both before the credits rolled and then moved on as though nothing unusual had happened. It all folds back into the same truth this town keeps proving. The family that can be frozen in time, unstuck in age, heard and unheard, deleted and rebuilt, holds at its very heart a baby who is somehow the source of all things. The smallest, least listened to person in the house, the one who can be wiped out by his own father's careless night, is the same one whose existence props up every star in the sky. The rules of cause and effect do not merely bend here. They curl all the way around and bite their own tail, with a baby in a high chair sitting at the exact point where the circle closes. Nowhere does the show reach higher or stranger than this, the moment it decided that everything that exists exists because of one of its own characters. Before we move on, if this analysis is landing for you, think about subscribing. It is a real help to the channel. The very machine that can carry Stewie back to the dawn of the universe can also be pointed at a much smaller, much closer beginning. There is a first moment for the Griffin family too, a single day when their whole story started, and that day can be visited just like any other. When the machine is aimed there, and it is the dog who does the aiming, the damage that follows comes not from any plan to take over the world, but from a few honest words spoken to the wrong person at the worst possible time. The day they broke the first episode. The great mess starts from the smallest possible reason. In an episode from the 10th season named Back to the Pilot, which first aired in November of 2011, Brian is fussing over an old tennis ball he has dug up. He remembers burying another one years before and wishes he could find it again. Stewie, ever glad to show off his machine, offers a simple favor. He will take Brian back in time so the dog can watch himself bury the ball and remember the exact spot. No grand plan, no scheme to rule anything. A baby helping a dog find a lost toy. That is the entire reason the two of them step into the machine and aim it at the past. The place the machine drops them is the strange part. They do not land in some random afternoon from years gone by. They land squarely inside the events of the very first episode of Family Guy, the day the whole story of this family began, back in 1999. The world around them looks noticeably different the moment they arrive. The colors are flatter, the lines are rougher, the movement is a little stiffer and stranger, because the show has redrawn these scenes in the old early art style it used when it first went on the air. Stewie and Brian, drawn in the smooth modern way, walk around inside a clumsier, older-looking version of their own town. They have traveled into the show's own beginning and are standing in the middle of its first chapter. There is something deeply odd about characters visiting the day they were born as a show. They watch their past selves go about the events that started everything. They move through the very first story the audience ever saw, the one that introduced the family to the world. The show has folded all the way back on itself, reaching into its own opening and walking its present-day characters through it, like tourists strolling through a museum of their own past. The rougher animation is the show holding up a mirror to its younger self, letting the two versions share the screen, the polished now and the unpolished then standing side by side. While they are back there, Brian makes a choice that he believes is a good one. He knows what is coming in the years ahead. He knows that in 2001, a terrible attack will strike the country, the real and tragic events of that September that took thousands of lives. Standing in 1999 with that knowledge in his head, Brian decides he cannot simply do nothing. He quietly pulls his past self aside and warns him about the attack, telling his earlier version exactly what will happen and when, so that this time it can be stopped before it ever begins. He means it as an act of mercy. He thinks he is about to save thousands of people. Back in the present, the warning appears to have worked perfectly. The attack never happened. The past version of Brian, armed with the knowledge, fought off the attackers and got the planes grounded before they could be used. Because of it, that earlier Brian became a celebrated national hero, praised across the country for stopping a disaster nobody else saw coming. On the surface, this looks like the happiest possible outcome. A great tragedy was erased from history. Thousands who would have died are alive. For a brief moment, it seems Brian did a wonderful thing. The truth of the new world is far darker, and it spreads outward in widening rings. With that one event removed from history, the entire chain of what followed it bends and breaks. The fear and anger the attack once stirred up never came, and without it, the president of that era loses his bid for a second term. From that single missing election, the country slides into ruin. The southern states break away from the rest, reforming a version of the old Confederacy the nation fought a war over long ago, and a second great civil war erupts across the land. One prevented tragedy did not lead to peace. It pulled the thread that held the country together, and the country came apart. Stewie and Brian decide to see how far the damage runs, so they push the machine further ahead to look at the future this new path leads to. The world they find there is drawn in a different way from everything around it, in a cold, hard, computer-made style that sets it apart from the soft, hand-drawn look of the rest of the show. The future is a ruin. The land is a burned-out wasteland, scorched and lifeless, wrecked by nuclear attacks that wiped out cities and killed millions upon millions of people. The kind warning Brian gave to save thousands has, in the long run, helped destroy nearly everyone. The road he meant as a rescue ended in the end of the world. The lesson buried in all of this is an old and frightening one about how change works. A tiny act in the past does not stay tiny. It rolls forward through the years, touching one thing, which touches another, which touches 100 more, until the small ripple has grown into a wave that swallows everything. Brian changed one thing. He spoke a few sentences to himself in 1999. From those few sentences grew a flipped election, a broken country, a civil war, and finally, a dead and poisoned world. The size of the cause and the size of the result have nothing to do with each other. A whisper in the past became the roar of the apocalypse in the future. Faced with the ruin he has caused, Brian agrees they must undo it. So the two of them travel back to 1999 once more to stop Brian from ever giving the warning. The fix seems to take hold. They return to the present, expecting to find their normal world waiting. Instead, they find a new problem of Brian's own making. Rather than warning himself about the attack this time, Brian used the trip to tell his past self to take credit for the famous Harry Potter books, so that now Brian is celebrated across the world as their author, having stolen the fame for a work he did not write. He stopped meddling with the disaster and started meddling with something else entirely. The dog cannot seem to keep his mouth shut when handed a chance to change his own past. Stewie has had enough. Watching Brian learn nothing and reach for yet another lie, he drags the dog back into the machine and returns to 1999 one final time, now with a single goal. He intends to stop their past selves from telling the past anything at all about the future, to seal the leak completely and end the endless cycle of fixes that keep making things worse. This last trip is the one that breaks the whole situation wide open, because Stewie and Brian are no longer the only travelers trying to reach that moment. The same instant in 1999 fills up with copies of themselves. Around 50 different versions of Stewie and Brian, each one come from a different ruined or warped future. All converge on the exact same spot in the past, every single pair trying to stop the others from interfering. The two characters the audience knows are suddenly standing in a crowd of their own duplicates, each pair the survivor of a different broken timeline, each convinced that they are the ones who must set things right. The single moment buckles under the weight of so many of the same two people crammed into it at once. The crowd of duplicates is a parade of every wrong turn time could take. One Stewie among them has grown a pair of female breasts. One pair of them is trapped inside spinning barber poles, doomed to turn round and round with no way out. Another pair is dressed head to toe in banana costumes. One of the Bryans has had his throat cut. Each twisted version is a snapshot of a different disaster, a different timeline gone sideways, all of them gathered in one room like a gallery of nightmares, every figure proof of yet another way the trips through time could end in horror. Drowning in copies of himself, the original Stewie takes charge in the strangest way imaginable. He gathers all the future versions together and makes them hold a vote on whether they should prevent the 2001 attack at all. Hands go up, hands stay down, and when the count is done, the majority has voted no. Having settled the matter by show of hands, Stewie orders every version present to stop telling the past about the future and to return to their own times, and one by one, they obey and disappear. A choice about whether to change one of the darkest days in real history gets decided by a crowd of cartoon duplicates taking a vote the way a class might vote on where to go for a field trip. With the duplicates sent home, Stewie finishes the job. He takes his own Brian back to a minute before their past selves first arrived and forces those past selves, at the point of a gun, to climb into the machine and go back to the present, ending the chain of meddling at its source. In the scramble, the arriving Brian even takes a shot to the leg before they fall in line. Once the past pair is sent home, the entire altered timeline collapses and ceases to exist, and the versions of Stewie and Brian who lived through the broken world wink out along with it, erased, because the path that created them no longer runs. The note the episode ends on is a heavy one, and it is the reason this story is among the most talked about and most uncomfortable the show has ever made. With the proper history put back in place, the terrible attack happens again, exactly as it did in the real world, and the show frames its two heroes as relieved and even pleased that things have returned to the way they were, attack and all. The humor sits right on the edge of a real and recent tragedy, and the show steps right up to that edge on purpose, using one of the darkest days in living memory as the punchline to a time travel adventure. The episode earned a great deal of shock and discomfort for exactly that reason, and it has stayed famous for how far it was willing to go. Looking at the whole thing from a step back, the craft on display is striking. The show rebuilt its own first episode in the old art style, threading its actual history into the body of the story. It painted the broken future in cold computer animation to make it feel alien and wrong. It stacked two of the heaviest ideas in all of time travel into 1/2 hour, the tiny change that grows into the end of the world, and the dozens of versions of the same people, all crowding into a single instant. The same machine that once lit the spark of the entire universe is here pointed at a far smaller beginning, the family's own first day, and proves that this beginning is just as easy to rewrite, just as fragile, just as open to being broken by a few careless words. Before we move on, if this analysis is landing for you, think about subscribing. It is a real help to the channel. The trips so far have all worked the same basic way. The travelers leap to one chosen moment, change something there, and watch the change spread. The next disaster comes from a completely different kind of mistake. Instead of jumping to a single point in the past to tinker with it, the flow of time itself gets knocked loose and begins to run the wrong way, dragging the whole world backward second by second, hauling the baby ever closer to the moment of his birth, and then toward the moment just before it, when he would slip out of existence entirely. The world that ran backwards. The 11th season holds an episode the show was proud enough to dress up as a milestone, promoting it as the 200th episode, even though, by the true order it aired in, it landed a little earlier than that count. Its name is the cleverest hint of all about what is inside it. The episode is called Yug Ilimaf, which is simply the show's own name, Family Guy, written backward. The title runs in reverse because the whole episode does, and the disaster at its heart comes not from any grand plan to change history, but from the dog quietly borrowing the time machine for the most selfish little reason imaginable. Brian, it turns out, has been sneaking off with Stewie's machine to impress the women he dates. His trick is to whisk a date back through time to witness a famous moment from history, the kind of thing no ordinary man could ever show a girl. He carries them off to see great events, dramatic moments, the sort of sights meant to dazzle. Every one of these secret outings adds to a counter on the machine, a small dial that keeps track of how far through time the device has traveled. The more dates Brian takes on his trips, the higher that number climbs, and the higher it climbs, the more obvious it becomes that someone has been using the machine without permission. Brian panics about getting caught, and his cover-up is what breaks everything. To hide all the trips, he tries to wind the counter backward, turning the dial in reverse to erase the evidence of how far the machine has gone. The machine does not take kindly to the tampering. It breaks down, and when Brian and Stewie climb inside to try to repair it, it bursts apart in a blast, leaving them standing among the shattered pieces. Neither of them realizes right away what the explosion has actually done. By winding the dial the wrong way, Brian has done something far worse than break a gadget. He has flipped the direction of time itself, and the whole world has begun to run backward. The truth comes out in two stages. First, Stewie finds the proof of Brian's secret joyrides and forces the dog to confess what he has been doing with the machine. Then, with the confession barely finished, Stewie glances out the window and sees something that stops him cold. Everyone outside is moving backward. People walk in reverse, cars roll in reverse, the whole street undoing its own motion. Brian catches on a moment later when he watches a neighbor reach into his pocket, take out a coin, set it down on the ground, and stroll away backward, doing the exact opposite of picking up money he found. The plain wrongness of that small action is what makes it real for him. Time is running the wrong way. A world in reverse is a deeply strange thing to witness. Every action plays out as its own undoing. People do not eat, they uneat. They do not arrive, they unarrive, sliding backward out of rooms they were never quite in. Speech comes out as a tumble of sounds running the wrong direction. Even the little side jokes the show is famous for, the quick gags it cuts away to, begin playing backward, so that the show's own sense of humor folds in on itself and runs in reverse. The entire town is busy unhappening, peeling away its own recent past one undone moment at a time, with no one but Stewie and Brian aware that anything is wrong. The reversal does not hold a steady pace. It speeds up, racing faster and faster into the past, hauling Stewie and Brian backward through the years at a quickening clip. As they tumble back, they pass through famous moments from the show's own history, all of them replayed in reverse. A long-running brawl with a giant chicken, a fight the show has returned to many times, plays out backward, every punch unthrown. A notorious old scene of the family drinking something that made them violently sick runs in reverse too, so that the sick comes flying back up off the floor and into their mouths. The show is rewinding through its own greatest hits, undoing its own memories, sprinting deeper into the past with every second that ticks the wrong way. The deeper the rewind goes, the more it begins to undo not just actions, but people and lives. A neighbor who had moved away to another town is suddenly back living in Quahog again, his whole departure unwritten. A baby in the neighborhood, a child who had been born, becomes unborn, slipping back out of existence as the days that led to her birth are pulled away. Closer to home, Stewie watches his own baby teeth ungrow, retreating back into his gums as time peels his short life away from the wrong end. The world is not merely moving backward now, it is actively erasing the things that had come to be, person by person, tooth by tooth. The full horror of it lands on Stewie all at once. If time keeps rewinding, it will not stop at his teeth. It will race right back to the day he was born, and then to the moment just before it. And at that moment, he will be unborn, erased, gone before he ever began. The same fate that already swallowed the neighbor's baby. The clock is not just running backward, it is running backward toward the single point that would wipe him out of the world entirely, and it is speeding up as it goes, leaving less and less time to stop it. As the rewind closes in on his birth, Stewie's own body begins to come apart, along with everything else. The strength drains out of him. He loses the ability to walk, his legs slipping back toward the uselessness of a newborn, his small frame regressing toward the helpless bundle he once was. The boy who built a machine to travel through time can barely hold himself up, dragged backward toward the cradle, and then toward the day he came into the world, growing weaker and younger and closer to nothing with every passing moment. One small detail in the chaos shows just how cleverly the episode layered its idea. As the world rewinds far enough, Stewie notices that his sister Meg suddenly sounds different. Her voice has changed into the one she had in the very first 2 seasons of the show, back before the current actress took over the part, when a different performer gave Meg her voice. The rewind has reached so far into the past that even the show's own old casting has come back, the earlier voice returning as the years peel away. The real history of how the show was made, the swapping of one actress for another long ago, gets folded right into the story, so that the world running backward drags back not only the family's past, but the program's own behind-the-scenes past as well. The crisis reaches its peak at the hospital. Time has now rewound nearly a full year, all the way back to the very edge of Stewie's birth, the moment where he will be unborn for good. He is far too weak to do anything about it himself, barely able to move, slipping toward the point of his own beginning. With no strength left to fix the machine, he is forced to hand the whole task to the one other soul who knows the machine exists, the dog whose careless cover-up started this entire collapse in the first place. Stewie's fate now rests entirely in Brian's paws. Alone with the broken machine and the world unraveling around him, Brian works out the answer through plain trial and reason. The reversal began when he wound the dial backward, so the way to undo it is to do the exact opposite. He pushes the dial forward, hard, setting off a second blast much like the first. The explosion knocks him out cold, leaving him slumped and senseless, yet it leaves the machine itself in one piece, and more importantly, it flips the flow of time back to its proper forward direction. The rewind stops, the undoing ends, time at last begins moving the right way again. Brian comes to with the world set right, and time ticking forward as it should, and he races to the hospital as fast as he can. He arrives just in time to witness the moment of Stewie's birth, the baby coming safely into the world, alive and real and restored, pulled back from the very brink of never having existed. The rewind that nearly erased him has been stopped at the last possible second, and the smallest member of the family gets to be born after all, exactly as he was meant to. The way the episode ends ties the whole thing into a perfect knot. At the birth, the family needs a name for their new baby, and they settle on Stewie for one simple reason. They choose it because Brian keeps calling the newborn by that name. Sit with where that name actually comes from, though, and the floor drops away. Brian only knows the name Stewie at all because he traveled here from a future in which the baby is already named Stewie. He calls the newborn by the name he has always known the baby to have. The family hears him, likes it, and gives the baby that name. So the name travels in a closed circle. It comes from the future, where the baby already had it, back to the moment of birth, where it gets handed to the baby for the first time, which is what makes the future name exist in the first place. The name belongs to no original moment. No one ever truly chose it. It simply loops from the future to the past and back, holding itself up with no beginning anywhere along the ring, much like the universe-making blast from before. The very last beat circles back to an older puzzle. Once the newborn Stewie is home, his brother Chris mentions that he could have sworn he heard the baby talking. Lois waves the idea away as ridiculous, the notion that a newborn could speak. The show winks once more at its oldest unanswered question, the one about who can hear the baby and who cannot, dropping it in right at the end as a small reminder that even after a whole world ran backward and came forward again, that tangle is still tied as tightly as ever. Stepping back, the cleverness of the episode is hard to miss. The show built a believable backward world through careful sound and motion, ran its own famous scenes in reverse, turned its side jokes inside out, and even reached back to bring an old voice home, all in service of one rare and difficult idea. Many stories play with travel to the past or the future. Very few try to show time itself flowing the wrong way, every action undone, the whole world peeling backward toward nothing. The episode earned real praise for daring to attempt it, and for using a milestone moment to try something genuinely unlike what the show usually does. It all settles back into the same long pattern this town keeps repeating. The machine that once set off the birth of the entire universe, and once reached back to rewrite the family's own first day, has here flipped the very direction of time and come within a heartbeat of erasing the baby from existence. Yet again, the smallest and most overlooked member of the family is the one whose life hangs by a thread. Yet again, he is saved at the final possible second. And yet again, the danger comes not from some great enemy, but from a careless act by someone close to him. A dog telling a small lie, a number wound the wrong way, nearly costing a child his entire existence. Before we move on, if this analysis is landing for you, think about subscribing. It is a real help to the channel. This time, the dog's blunder nearly wiped out the baby, and the dog set it right with his own 2 paws. A later day turns those roles completely around. On that day, the one who dies is Brian himself, struck down for real, his body gone, a funeral held, the family left to grieve a loss they believe is final. And the only thing in the whole world that could ever open a door back to him is the very same troublesome machine that has caused so much chaos already. The death that would not stay. By the 12th season, the time machine has caused so many close calls that even Stewie has had enough of it. The episode named Life of Brian opens on yet another mess, with Stewie and Brian fleeing through the past in jeeps, chased by angry Native Americans. Brian explains the cause of it. On an earlier trip to Jamestown, the two of them handed the Native Americans guns, and those guns were used to wipe out the European settlers, leaving the Native Americans in charge of all of America. The whole shape of history has been twisted by their meddling. Stewie finds his way home blocked, his return pad shot to pieces by bullets. So the two of them slip over to the version of their own house that exists in this changed world, borrow the time machine and pad belonging to the other version of Stewie living there, and use it to go back and undo the damage. As soon as their earlier selves leave the scene, they take the guns back, and the proper course of history snaps into place. Worn down by one near disaster after another, Stewie makes a decision that turns out to matter more than he knows. He is done with the machine. The thing has nearly destroyed history too many times, and he no longer trusts himself with it. So he takes it to the junkyard and crushes the remains until nothing useful is left. The single most important tool in his entire life, the device that can fix any mistake and undo any tragedy, is gone, smashed flat by his own hand. The safety net that has saved him and the world again and again no longer exists. That detail sits quietly in the background, and it is the reason everything that follows feels so final. While they are at the junkyard, the two of them find a street hockey net and bring it home, thinking it would be good for a bit of exercise. They set it up out in the street. The very first time they get it standing, a car comes tearing down the road out of control and slams into Brian, striking him hard and leaving him badly broken in the road. There is no joke in the moment. The show does not soften it or cut away to something silly. It lets the horror of it land plainly. A sudden, brutal accident happening to a character the audience has loved for years. What comes next is played with a seriousness the show almost never allows itself. Brian is rushed to the vet, where it becomes clear his injuries are too severe to survive. The whole family gathers around him to say goodbye. He holds on just long enough to tell them, in his own quiet way, how much he loves them and how grateful he is for the life they gave him. And then he dies, there in front of all of them while they watch. The talking dog, the heart of so much of the show, the one steady friend the baby ever had, is gone. The episode treats his death as a true death, heavy and real, the kind of loss that does not come with a wink. Stewie takes it harder than anyone, and he blames himself most of all. He knows that if he had not destroyed his time machine, he could simply travel back and pull Brian out of the road before the car ever reached him. Desperate, he tries to rebuild the machine from scratch so he can do exactly that. The pieces he needs cannot be found, though. His source for the rare parts has dried up, and without those parts, the machine cannot be built. The one path back to his friend is sealed shut. Stewie is forced to accept the unbearable thing, that Brian is gone for good, and there is nothing his genius can do about it. The family holds a funeral, friends gather, words are spoken, and the dog is laid to rest. A month passes inside the story, and the grief does not lift. The house feels emptier. Stewie carries the loss like a stone. The show lets real time pass over the wound, the way real grief works, refusing to wave the sadness away with a quick fix. For a long stretch of the episode, Brian is simply dead, mourned, and missed, with the family slowly learning to live in the gap he left behind. Eventually, Lois decides the family needs a new dog to help them heal, and they go to the pet store. There, they meet a smooth-talking Italian dog named Vinny, and Peter takes him home. Vinny works hard to win the family over, cooking for them and charming Peter's friends. Stewie wants nothing to do with him at first, still loyal to the friend he lost and unwilling to let a stranger take Brian's spot. The wall finally comes down when Vinny, hearing Stewie cry, opens up about the death of his own former owner and shows that he understands exactly what it feels like to lose a best friend. Moved by that shared sorrow, Stewie accepts him. By the episode's end, Vinny has a place in the family, and every sign points to Brian being truly, permanently gone, his chair filled by a new dog for good. What happened outside the show was almost as dramatic as what happened inside it. Killing off a character as beloved as Brian set off a storm among the people watching. Fans were furious and heartbroken in equal measure. Petitions to bring the dog back spread across the internet and gathered enormous numbers of names. The writer of the episode later said he received threats over the decision. That is how raw the reaction ran. Behind the scenes, the original plan had been to leave Brian dead and keep Vinny on as the family's permanent dog. The sheer force of the backlash, the petitions and the anger and the grief of an audience that refused to let the character go, helped push the show to change its mind and find a way to undo what it had done. The undoing arrives just 2 episodes later, in an episode named Christmas Guy, and it brings every paradox in the show back to the surface at once. The family is facing their first Christmas without Brian. The mood is low to begin with, the mall's holiday carnival has been cancelled, and worst of all, no one in the family has so much as said Brian's name all season. For Stewie, that silence is the heaviest part. The friend he lost is being quietly forgotten, and the holiday that should be warm feels hollow and cold without him. Sitting on a mall Santa's lap, asked what he wants for Christmas, Stewie does not ask for a toy. He asks for his best friend back. He tells the Santa plainly that his dog Brian is dead, that it is their first Christmas without him, that no one will even speak his name, and that he does not care about anything else in the world, only about getting Brian back. Vinny does his best to lift Stewie's spirits and to be the friend the baby needs. Yet, nothing the new dog does can fill the hole. The wish hangs there, impossible, because the only tool that could ever grant it was crushed flat at a junkyard weeks ago. Then, chance hands Stewie exactly what he needs. Back at the mall, he spots a familiar figure in the crowd, and the figure is himself. A version of Stewie from before Brian died is there in the store buying a toy. Present Stewie remembers this moment perfectly because he is the one who bought that very toy just before the accident, on a trip he once took forward in time to beat the holiday rush for the newest playthings. A small thing he mentioned long ago, almost in passing, turns out to be the key to everything. There is a past version of himself standing right there, a Stewie from the days when Brian was still alive. The importance of it hits Stewie at once. That earlier version of himself is carrying a working time pad in his backpack, the exact tool present Stewie no longer has, the one device in the world that could carry him back to save his friend. Stewie pulls Vinny into a plan. Knowing how vain his past self is, they flatter him, and Vinny coaxes the earlier Stewie into slipping off his backpack. In that opening, present Stewie reaches in and takes the time pad, finally holding the means to undo the death that has crushed him for a month. Before he goes, Stewie turns to Vinny for a goodbye that carries a quiet ache. He tells Vinny the truth about what saving Brian will mean. If Brian never dies, then the family never goes to the pet store, never brings Vinny home, and the two of them never meet at all. The friendship Stewie and Vinny have built over the past month will be erased, unwritten, gone, because the loss that created it will no longer have happened. Vinny understands that helping Stewie means wiping himself out of the family entirely. He helps anyway, and wishes Stewie well as he leaves. A friend choosing to undo his own place in the family so that another friend can come home. Stewie travels back to the day of the accident and reaches the street in time. He saves Brian from the oncoming car, pulling his friend clear of the death that was coming, and then explains to a shocked and grateful Brian everything that happened: the death, the month of grief, the long road back. The dog who died is alive again, standing in the street whole, because his small friend crossed time to catch him before the end. Then comes the cost. Stewie sends the time pad back to the present, and as the new history takes hold, the present version of Stewie, the one who spent a month grieving and then crossed time to fix it, begins to fade away. He is fading because the future he came from, the future where Brian was dead, no longer happens. By saving Brian, he has erased the very path that led to him doing the saving. He vanishes quietly, while Brian, alive once more, thanks him. The Stewie who suffered the loss disappears, and the Brian who was lost remains, and the timeline rewrites itself around the rescue. The knots in this ending are tied tightly, one inside another. The pad that saved Brian came from Stewie's own earlier self, a tool handed from Stewie to Stewie across time, never bought or built in the moment, simply lifted from a version of himself who happened to still have one. The version of Stewie who carried out the rescue erased himself by succeeding, undone by his own victory, gone the instant he won. Vinny, who made the whole rescue possible, was wiped out of the family by the very act he helped to pull off, the helper undone by the help, a friend who chose to stop existing alongside the family so that the old friend could return. And the entire plan rested on a tiny line Stewie dropped 2 episodes earlier, a throwaway mention of a trip to beat the toy rush, quietly planted so that a past Stewie with a working pad would be standing in that mall at exactly the right moment. Underneath all the clever loops sits the largest paradox of all, and it is one about meaning rather than mechanics. The show killed a main character with complete seriousness. It gave him a real death, a real funeral, a real month of grief, and a real replacement, and it asked the audience to feel all of it as true and final. Then it took the whole thing back. The death was undone, the loss reversed, the dog returned as though he had never been struck down at all. In a world where a time machine can be rebuilt or borrowed from a past self, no death can ever truly be the end. Any loss can be reached back into and rubbed out. The way the show asked everyone to feel turns out to rest on nothing solid, because the rules of this town will not let even death stay put. A grave here is only a temporary thing, a problem waiting for the right pad to fix. It all settles into the same long pattern that has run through every one of these stories. The machine that once lit the birth of the universe, that reached back to rewrite the family's first day, that flipped the very direction of time, has now been used to reverse death itself and call a buried friend back to life. The roles have flipped from the last great mess. In the world that ran backward, the dog crossed time to save the baby from being unborn. Here, the baby crosses time to save the dog from being dead. The two of them keep trading places at the edge of existence, each taking turns to haul the other back from the brink, the machine forever blurring the line between gone and here. Before we move on, if this analysis is landing for you, think about subscribing. It is a real help to the channel. In every story so far, the danger has come by accident, a misfire, a careless lie, a kind warning, a sudden car. A later day breaks that pattern in the darkest way. There comes a point when the baby, sick of his loud and clumsy family, picks up the machine and turns it against himself on purpose. He decides he does not want to exist in this family at all, and he sets out fully intending to wipe his own self clean off the page. The strange part is what he discovers when he tries, because in this town, even erasing yourself refuses to work the simple way. The baby who tried to delete himself. By now, the machine has done almost everything a machine could do. It has lit the start of the universe, rewritten the family's first day, flipped the flow of time, and pulled a dead friend back to life. In the season finale of the 12th season, an episode named Chap Stewie, the baby aims that power at the strangest target left to him. He aims it at himself. Tired of his loud, slow-witted family, sick of being trapped among people he sees as fools, Stewie decides he no longer wants to exist as a griffin at all, and he sets out to wipe his own self clean off the page on purpose. The thing that finally pushes him over the edge is small. Stewie is curled up watching his favorite television show, a fancy British period drama full of grand houses and polite speech, the kind of program he adores. Peter and Chris come barreling through the room playing a rough game of their own invention, knocking each other over with mattresses, thumping and crashing about. In the middle of their horseplay, they slam into the television and destroy it, cutting off Stewie's show right in the middle. Something in the baby snaps. The rage that pours out of him is real and ugly. When Lois comes over to comfort him, he bites her. He hurls a framed photograph of Meg across the room. When Meg tries to hug him, he headbutts her hard enough to break her nose. This is not a baby throwing a small tantrum over a toy. This is a child who has decided, in a white-hot moment of fury, that he cannot stand one more second of life among these people. The destroyed television was the last straw on a pile that had been building for a long time, and now he wants out, completely and permanently. Stewie reveals that he has built a new and improved time machine, better than the one that was crushed at the junkyard. His plan is unlike any trip he has taken before. He does not mean to change a single event or rescue a single soul. He means to erase himself. He will travel back to the time before he was ever born and break up his parents before they can make him, so that he is never brought into this family at all. No more griffins, no more idiots. Simply gone, dissolved out of having ever been by stopping the love that created him. He sets the machine for about 3 years into the past, back to the days before he came to be, and slips into that earlier time to watch the events that led to his birth. What he finds there throws a wrench into his cold plan right away. His parents, Peter and Lois, were truly and deeply in love. Their bond was real, warm, and strong, the kind of love that does not break easily. To erase himself, Stewie will have to tear that love apart, and the strength of it means the job will be harder than he expected. He throws scheme after scheme at the problem. First, he runs up his mother's credit cards on a pile of embarrassing purchases, hoping the shock will start a fight. The plan backfires when the family simply enjoys the things he bought. Next, he shaves his father's head completely bald, hoping the humiliation will drive a wedge between the couple. That fails too, when his mother kindly reassures his father and the love between them holds firm. Every attack he makes on their bond glances off it. The two of them keep choosing each other, again and again, no matter what he throws at them. The scheme that finally works is a cruel one. Stewie gathers up his father's hidden stash of dirty magazines and gives the whole collection away to a charity store, then scrawls crude, nasty drawings all over the walls of the house. The double blow lands hard. His parents turn on each other in a furious fight, the kind that does not heal, and the fight drives them apart at last. The love that was supposed to create him is broken, and with that love shattered, Stewie's existence in the Griffin family is erased. He has done it. He has unmade himself. What happens next upends the entire point of his plan. By every normal rule of how this works, erasing the moment of his making should mean he simply ceases to be, fading into nothing, gone without a trace, exactly the empty silence he was chasing. Instead, Stewie opens his eyes and finds himself a baby again, lying in a crib in a completely different home. He has been reborn into a wealthy British family, living in a grand and stately manner, the very kind of fancy household from the period dramas he loves. He works out his own explanation for it. His soul, he figures, was simply passed along to the next baby being born at that exact moment in time, sliding from one crib into another rather than blinking out. Pause on that explanation, because the show is making up a brand new rule of the universe in a single breath. Faced with the question of where a person goes when they erase their own birth, the show decides that the soul does not disappear at all. It relocates. It slips into the next available newborn and carries on, memories and all. Self-deletion in this town does not delete anyone. It simply moves them to a different family. The most final act a person could attempt, the choice to never have existed, gets quietly downgraded into a change of address. Stranger still is what Stewie keeps. He carries every memory of his old life into the new one. He remembers the Griffins in full, remembers his mother and father, and his brother and sister, and his dog, remembers a whole childhood spent in that house. In the new world he lives in, none of that ever happened to him. He was never their child. He has no blood tie to them at all, and never did. Yet the memories sit there in his head, clear and complete, a full record of a life that, in this timeline, belongs to no one. He remembers a past that has been unwritten, holding tight to a family that, as far as the new world is concerned, was never his. The rich British life glitters at first and then goes sour. There is money, a beautiful house, fine clothes, the trappings of a grand life. The shine fades quickly. His new older brothers are sharp-tongued and genuinely cruel, far cleverer and far nastier than the warm, dim family he ran from. Rather than being loved by his new parents, he is handed off to be raised by the household staff, kept at arm's length, treated as one more duty among many. The family he chose turns out to be colder and harder than the one he fled. And slowly, painfully, Stewie begins to miss the Griffins. The idiots he could not stand start to look, from this distance, like the people who actually loved him. He decides to undo what he has done. His new father happens to be a professor at a famous English university, and Stewie sneaks into the university's laboratory, where he scrapes together the parts for another rough time machine. With it, he sets out to repair the damage, to mend his parents' love, and to find his way back to the family he now understands he wants. The baby who built a machine to erase himself builds a second machine to bring himself back, chasing his way home to the very life he tried so hard to destroy. He travels back and comes face to face with the version of himself from the original timeline, the Stewie who still belongs to the Griffins. The two of them stand together, two copies of the same baby working side by side toward the same goal. He tells his other self about the cold, lonely life his plan led to, about the cruel brothers and the absent parents and the home that never felt like one. Together, the two Stewies set about fixing the thing that broke. The pair of them remind Peter and Lois how much they love each other, working to patch the wound that tore the couple apart, rebuilding the bond that leads to Stewie's birth into the Griffin family. The love is mended, and the path back to the proper world opens up as Stewie says his goodbyes to his other self. The episode closes on a few dark and odd beats. A stage light from one of Peter's public access television tapings falls and kills the British version of Stewie, so that one copy of the baby dies while the other heads home. Back in the proper timeline, the original Stewie is simply glad to be a Griffin again. The closing gags land lightly. Chris admits he spent the entire 3 years working through his father's hidden magazine collection, and a member of the British family arrives to take revenge on Stewie for a wound he caused back in the past. Underneath the adventure sits a tangle that should not be able to exist at all. To erase himself, Stewie first had to live long enough to grow up, build the machine, and travel back. If he had truly succeeded in erasing his own birth, then he would never have existed to grow up and build the machine and travel back to erase his own birth in the first place. The plan eats itself. It is a loop that cancels its own beginning, an action that removes the very person needed to perform the action. By the plain rules of cause and effect, the whole thing simply cannot happen. The show feels the problem coming and refuses to let it collapse, patching the hole with the made-up soul transfer trick so that Stewie can erase himself and still be around to regret it. The deepest crack of all opens up when this episode is set beside an earlier one, because here, the show quietly shatters one of its own grandest rules. In the episode about the Big Bang, the show declared, plainly and as a matter of life and death, that if Stewie ever stopped existing, the entire universe would come apart. His existence, that earlier story insisted, is the thing that set off the blast that created everything. So without him, there is no blast, no universe, nothing. When his brother tried to prevent his birth in that story, reality itself began to crumble, the world blinking out piece by piece, the stars themselves at risk. The stakes could not have been higher. No Stewie meant no universe at all. Here, in this episode, Stewie prevents his own birth on purpose, the exact thing that nearly destroyed all of creation before, and none of that happens. No ripple spreads out, no world begins to collapse. No stars wink out. The universe rolls calmly along, completely unbothered, and Stewie simply turns up in a different crib in a different house. The show's own iron rule, the one it built an entire episode around, the rule that Stewie's non-existence unravels reality, is broken here without so much as a sentence of explanation. One paradox is stacked directly on top of an earlier paradox, and the two of them flatly contradict each other. In one story, erasing Stewie ends the universe. In the other, erasing Stewie is barely an inconvenience. This is the town at its loosest, and it reveals something about how little holds it together. The place does not merely break the everyday laws of time and age, and life and death. It breaks the very rules it invented in order to break those laws. The grand cosmic stakes of one episode mean nothing in the next. A rule can be carved in stone one year and ignored the following one, with no one inside the show ever noticing the difference. There is no solid floor here, and beneath that missing floor, there is no second floor either. Whatever a story needs in the moment becomes the rule for that moment, and the moment after is free to forget it entirely. The whole adventure folds back into the long chain that runs through all of these stories. The same machine that birthed the universe, rewrote the family's first day, flipped the direction of time, and reversed a death, has now let a child erase his own existence and slide his soul into a new life. Once again, the baby sits at the dead center of it, his very existence the thing being switched off and on like a light. Once again, the show reaches for the biggest idea imaginable, a person deleting himself from reality, and then strolls right past the enormous contradiction it leaves lying in the road. Before we move on, if this analysis is landing for you, think about subscribing. It is a real help to the channel. The most telling part is where Stewie ended up when he wiped himself out. He did not fall into nothing. He landed in another version of life entirely, a different family, a different house, a different world. His soul slid sideways into a fresh crib, as though such a place had simply been waiting for him. That points straight at a far larger truth, one the show stated out loud in another episode. There is not one single world holding one single version of this family. There are endless worlds, countless of them, sitting side by side, each one holding its own Griffins, its own Peter and Lois, its own baby, and its own dog. The show once opened a door to those endless worlds and walked the baby and the dog straight through dozens of them, one after another, proving that the family the audience knows is only a single drop in an ocean of others, the endless other worlds. The baby's rebirth into a wealthy British family left one big question dangling in the air. When Stewie erased himself, he did not fall into nothing. His soul slid sideways into a different crib, in a different house, in what amounted to a different world. That only makes sense if there is somewhere for an erased soul to go. In an episode from the 8th season named Road to the Multiverse, one of the most loved the show has ever made, the answer arrives in full. There is somewhere to go, and the somewhere is enormous beyond counting. There are endless other worlds sitting right alongside the one the audience knows, and the show throws open a door and walks the baby and the dog straight through a whole string of them. This story belongs to a special little family of episodes the show has returned to many times over the years. They are called the Road episodes, and they always pair Brian and Stewie together for some long adventure away from home. The name is borrowed from a set of old comedy films made between the 1940s and the 1960s, a series of breezy travel movies starring a trio of famous old performers, Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, and Dorothy Lamour. The man who created Family Guy loved those old films and built his own version around the dog and the baby, sending them off on grand trips the way the old movies sent their stars from one far-off place to another. The very first of these episodes, made back in the 2nd season, followed Brian and Stewie as they searched for Brian's long-lost mother. This multiverse story was not even planned as one of those road adventures at first, and it grew into one along the way. There is a quiet piece of history behind the timing of this episode too. A while before it aired, the writers across television had stopped working during a long and bitter dispute over their pay, a standstill that froze the whole industry for months. The man who made Family Guy stood with the writers and joined the walkout until it ended. Because of that long pause, the season before this one ran entirely on episodes that had been finished earlier and held in reserve. This multiverse story was the first brand new episode the show produced and aired once the writers returned to their desks, which gives it the feel of the show stretching its legs and reaching for something big after being held still for so long. The journey begins at a carnival, where Stewie shows off a strange pig he has somehow created. When Brian asks where the odd animal came from, Stewie reveals his newest invention, a remote control that can jump the two of them between worlds that run side by side with their own. He lays the idea out plainly. There are an endless number of universes, he explains, sitting next to each other on separate planes, and in every single one of them, things turned out a little differently, or wildly differently, from the way they did at home. The remote lets him hop from one to the next, like flipping channels on a television, except every channel is a whole separate reality. Their first stop alone shows how far a single change can ripple. They land in a world where one long, dark stretch of history that once slowed science to a crawl never happened, and so this world raced ahead. It is roughly 1,000 years more advanced than the one the Griffins come from. Flying cars drift through the air. Diseases that still kill people back home have been cured and forgotten. Wonders the family has never imagined are simply ordinary daily life here. From one altered chapter of the past, an entire world bloomed into something almost unrecognizable, and the two of them have only just begun. The tour speeds up from there, and the worlds come fast. They drop into a place where every single person has two heads, the whole population doubled at the neck. They land in a world drawn in the rough, rocky style of an old Stone Age cartoon, where even their own speech bends to match the new world's way of talking. They tumble into a version of reality drawn in the bright, big-eyed style of Japanese animation, the family redrawn to fit. Each jump rebuilds the entire look and feel of the world around them, the colors, the shapes, the rules, the way people move and speak, all of it swapped out in an instant. The strange worlds keep stacking up. There is a world where every person is gripped, all at once, by a desperate and urgent need to find a bathroom. There is a world that looks like real filmed life, with actual people instead of drawings, the cartoon family suddenly standing in a place that looks photographed rather than painted. There is a world that appears to be made of small, posable toy figures moved by hand, a tiny step at a time, jerky and stiff, like a child's playthings come to life, a nod to another show built entirely out of that kind of animation. They visit a frozen, ancient version of their own town, buried in the Ice Age. They pass through a world that holds nothing at all except a single man far off in the distance, calling out kind compliments to anyone who arrives. They even drop into a blurry, low-quality world where everything looks smeared and unfinished, the picture itself broken. The sheer number and variety pile higher and higher, each one a complete reality unto itself. So many worlds were packed into the episode that some of them did not even survive into the reruns. One of the stops, a version built around a famous newspaper, gets quietly cut when the episode is shown again in later airings, trimmed for time so the rest can fit. The show had crammed in more separate realities than a single broadcast could comfortably hold, and one of them ended up left on the cutting room floor for anyone who came to the episode later. Even the list of worlds, it turns out, has more than one version of itself, depending on where and when a person watches. The showpiece of the whole journey is the world drawn in the lush, lovely style of classic old Disney cartoons. This stretch of the episode is the most beautiful animation the show has ever produced, smooth and rich and glowing, every creature bright-eyed and graceful, everyone breaking into cheerful song as they stroll along. The amount of effort poured into it was staggering. By the show's own account, the entire animation budget for the whole season went into this single stretch of roughly 3 minutes. Every spare dollar funneled into making those few moments look as gorgeous as a treasured childhood movie. For that brief window, the rough and rowdy world of Family Guy transforms into something tender and dazzling, the kind of image people remember for years. The beauty of that world is a thin mask over something ugly, and the show pulls the mask off on purpose. The cheerful sing-song place suddenly turns cruel, the whole crowd rounding on one character, the family's neighbor Mort, and attacking him simply for being Jewish. Stewie remarks with grim flatness that this is, after all, a Disney world. The loveliest place they visit hides an old and hateful prejudice beneath all the singing, and the show uses the contrast as a sharp, pointed jab at the famous studio whose style it borrowed so carefully. The prettier the surface, the harder the insult underneath, and the show spent its richest, most beautiful moment setting up its cruelest joke. There is a twist to that jab that comes from far outside the show itself, and it is stranger than anything in the episode. In the spring of the year 2019, about a decade after this episode aired, the Disney company purchased the studio that makes Family Guy. The very company the show mocked so harshly, the one it dressed up as beautiful and then exposed as hateful, ended up owning Family Guy outright, along with every insult the show ever threw its way. A joke once aimed at a distant giant now belongs to that giant, and all the jabs the show had made at Disney over the years suddenly sat inside Disney's own vault. The show wrote a punchline at a company's expense, and then, years later, became that company's property. A real-life turn of events that loops back on itself in a way no writer could have planned. Eventually, the hopping lands them in the world that drives the rest of the story, a place where dogs are in charge and humans are the pets. Dogs walk on 2 legs, run the households, and keep humans on leashes. Brian, finding himself among his own kind in a world built for them, likes it there a great deal, perhaps too much. In a tussle with Stewie over the remote, the device slips from his grip and shatters on the ground. The way home is broken. The two of them are stranded in the one world where dogs rule and humans obey, with no easy path back to the life they left. Needing help, they make their way to the version of their own house that exists in this flipped world, and they meet the dog versions of the entire Griffin family. Every member has a mirror twin here, the roles reversed, the family rebuilt with dogs in the people's seats. Among the household is a human version of Brian, a man kept as the family pet, the exact opposite of the talking dog the audience knows. The reflection is complete, top to bottom, a whole second Griffin family living the same life from the other side of the leash. One detail in that house opens a door onto something dizzying. The dog version of Stewie has, entirely on his own, worked out the very same power to travel between worlds, aiming his jumps with exact directions, like an address for each reality. Sit with what that means. If this world has its own Stewie who learned to travel between worlds, and the home world has a Stewie who learned the same thing, then the endless other worlds likely hold endless other Stewies, many of them, perhaps, capable of the same trick. The question of which Stewie is the real one, the original, the true center, has no answer. Every world holds its own, and each one is just as real to itself as any other. That question cracks open the largest idea in the whole episode. The entire journey rests on the claim that there are endless worlds, each holding its own complete version of the family, the same people living slightly or wildly different lives. If that is true, then the Griffins the audience has followed for all these years are only one set among an endless number of sets. There is nothing special about their world, nothing that marks it as the real one, no reason it should count as the true story, rather than any of the countless others sitting beside it. Every version of the family in every world believes its own life is the real one and the only one. Each of them is the hero of a story it thinks is the single true story, while an endless crowd of other versions thinks exactly the same thing about itself. None of them has any better claim than the rest. The home the audience knows is one drop in a sea with no shore, and the drop has no way of knowing it is only a drop. The way out comes with help from the dog world's residents and from the human version of Brian. The Stewie of the home world had been captured and taken to the pound, where he was about to be put down, and the group breaks him free in time. Together, they find a way to open a path back to their own reality, and the baby and the dog step through it, escaping the world of ruling dogs and returning to the life they came from. The crisis closes. The two of them are home, the adventure behind them. The human Brian does not come with them, and his ending is the part that grows heavier with time. As the door between worlds closes, this human version of Brian, dazzled by the endless possibilities he has glimpsed, sets off to chase a bigger and freer life for himself. He heads out into the world full of hope, and then, in the very last beat, he steps into the street and is struck and killed by a passing car. A bright, hopeful goodbye snuffed out in an instant, played as a quick, dark joke right before the credits. That small, throwaway death lands strangely once it is held up against a later episode. 4 seasons after this one aired, the main Brian, the beloved dog at the heart of the show, would die in the exact same way, hit by a car in that same town. A quick gag tossed off at the end of one episode quietly predicted the single most painful death the show would ever stage, years before it happened. The same fate, the same kind of dog, the same sudden car in the same streets, set down once as a punchline and once as a tragedy, separated by 4 years of episodes. The show rhymed with itself across time without anyone watching realizing, the first car waiting all those years for the second one to give it meaning. Set the 2 scenes side by side, and it almost looks as if the later death was hiding in plain sight from the beginning, a seed planted long before anyone knew it would grow. This episode turns out to be the key that unlocks the baby's rebirth from the self-deletion story. When Stewie erased himself and woke up as a baby in a British family, that outcome made no sense in a world that holds only one reality. There would be nowhere for an erased soul to land. Set against the endless worlds shown here, the puzzle dissolves at once. His soul did not vanish into nothing, because nothing is not the only option. It slid into one of the countless other worlds that are always sitting alongside his own, slipping from one reality into the next. 2 episodes made years apart, never meant to be read together, quietly agree with each other and explain one another like 2 halves of a single thought reaching across the gap between them. The episode also widens the whole story to its largest possible frame. The machine and its cousins have lit the start of the universe, rewritten the family's first day, flipped the direction of time, called a dead friend back, and let a child erase and relocate his own soul. This episode pulls the camera back farther than any of them, declaring that there is not one broken town with bending rules. There are endless broken towns, an unending shelf of them, each with its own frozen baby, and its own ageless dog, and its own loose and shifting laws, stretching out forever in every direction. The single strange place the audience has been touring all along turns out to be one room in a building with no walls and no end. One quahog among a forever of quahogs, each as cracked and rule-free as the last. The craft on display matches the size of the idea. The show summoned an army of different animation styles for this one episode. The rough Stone Age look, the big-eyed Japanese look, the gorgeous Disney look that took a whole season's budget, the world of real filmed people, the world of little hand-moved toy figures, the blurry broken world, and more besides. Every kind of animation the show could reach for was put to work, each one building a whole separate reality in a matter of seconds. All of that effort served a single point: that reality is not one fixed thing, but an endless row of variations, and the show proved it by literally redrawing the world over and over before the audience's eyes. The look of the show, the one thing that might seem the most solid and settled of all, turned out to be just one more rule that could be swapped out at will. The deepest tangle of all is the quietest one, and it hangs over everything the show has ever done. If there are endless versions of this family, then every choice, every death, every rescue, is only one version among countless others where things went the opposite way. Somewhere out there sits a world where Brian stayed dead in the road. Somewhere sits a world where Peter never found his way back to Lois, and the children were never born. Somewhere sits a world where the baby was never made, and the universe quietly ended, exactly as the Big Bang story warned it would. All of those worlds exist at the same time, side by side, every outcome playing out somewhere. Nothing the audience watches is ever the only version of what happened, which means nothing in the town is ever truly fixed, truly final, or truly the whole story. Every ending is also unending, undone in 1,000 other rooms down the endless hall. Laid out side by side, all of these tangles stop looking like a scattered handful of clever episodes where the rules happen to bend for a laugh. A baby frozen at 1-year-old while the world ages around him. A dog too young to have his own son and too old to be alive at all. A child heard and unheard in the same breath. A family erased by one skipped night and rebuilt by one mended one. A baby who lit the entire universe and nearly snuffed it out. A first day rewritten, a world run backward, a death undone, a self deleted and shipped to another family, and an endless shelf of other worlds where every bit of it happens differently at once. Seen all together, the town stops looking like a place where the rules occasionally break and starts looking like a place that was never built on any fixed rules to begin with. What that says about the show itself, and about why a place with no solid floor beneath it can still feel, after all these years, so much like home, is the thread left to pull on last. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.